Am I coming through loud and clear? Okay. I'll let folks trickle in just a little bit longer, just a minute or two or so, and then I'll kind of get to it. So today is sort of like the next two labs. It's a bit of a open session. So rather than doing something like walking through a homework or walking through any particular thing, I'm sort of just going to answer questions, probably show some very basic things like opening up a markdown document and doing some like basic stuff. And then from there, we'll just be kind of guided by what you all want to see done with this. And yeah, we'll just kind of go with it because it's, you know, take it as far as you want or do relatively basic stuff. No question is dumb or too simple at this stage, you know? I mean, it really doesn't matter what you got. I'm happy to answer it. And very often the questions are actually substantially more complicated than you think. Sometimes people will be like, oh, I know this is a really dumb question, and then it's this like actually a tangent and being like, well, it's a surprisingly complicated topic. You know, so we'll get into it. Yeah. Let me get my shared screen up real quick. Make sure I don't have anything weird sitting over here. Prepping for a job talk tomorrow, so got a million things open. Let's see. Screen one. There we go. Let's get chat back up. Chat. There we go. Okay. It's showing my R instance, right? Okay. The nods are tremendously helpful. I appreciate them. Let's see. Okie dokie. Okay. Okay. So you can feel free, like in labs, you can feel free to ask questions verbally. I also have the chat right there, and I tend, you know, not to miss stuff too much. So, you know, ask however you're comfortable with. What I'll do first is just kind of open up in our Markdown document to show how you get started on this, because it's very reasonable for you to have attended lecture and not caught the 30 seconds or 1 minute where I showed how to do this on account of the number of things we covered. So I'll walk you through the basic part of the process. Okay, so I guess before I get started, is anybody currently having any like RStudio issues? I mean, do they need any help with installation, anything like that that's holding them back from basically having a window like this open? And to answer that question in chat, yeah, when this class is done remotely, as it seems like it will be done for the rest of my life, I record all of the labs and I'll send them out to the mailing list. So, you know, you'll be able to see them. And then that sort of also makes it so you don't have to like synchronously be able to tap in. It's kind of ridiculous. I know I have a bunch of students every term who are overseas in Europe or in Asia or something, and I'm not really going to make them alarm clock for that. Yeah. Yeah, so if nobody has any problems like getting RStudio running or this sort of thing, just open. For you, your screen, if you just freshly open RStudio and have never done anything in it, probably looks something like this. And you don't have this little like pane up here. If you have worked on something else, you may have something in front of you that looks kind of like this. This is actually the syllabus for the class, and the background is our Markdown document like everything else in the class. So for this homework, what you would do, right, is like every other homework in this class, you're going to make an R Markdown document. And for the first 3 homeworks, you're going to make them completely from scratch. For the latter ones, you'll be provided a template. So if you can go ahead, unless you've already started with one, then disregard this. You can go up to the little green plus sign file thing in the top left of RStudio and go down to R Markdown. You can see in this menu that RStudio can make a lot of different types of files. So RStudio is plenty happy to let you work in other programming languages, do all sorts of weird different types of documents and things like that. In my class, we really mainly are going to be covering R scripts and R Markdown documents, but there's sort of an infinite wealth of stuff out there. So if you go and open a fresh R Markdown document, you're going to get this pop-up window that we saw in lecture again. And here you can give it a title. You can fill in the author section too. I'm just going to go ahead and do it and just say, let's call this Homework 1, I'm going to say is me. I'm going to leave it as an HTML output because that's what we're doing for this class. To do PDF output, you need to have a LaTeX installation on your computer. If people are interested in that, I can talk about how to do an installation. It's actually really quite easy. And Word documents just require you have Microsoft Word or OpenOffice on your computer. Okay, so I'm going to say, okay, and it's going to pop open a default R Markdown template. And sorry, I may have misinterpreted that question that was in chat. I was saying, where will the recording be? I'll send it out to the mailing list, and I may post it on the website. Maybe I'll just put it on the website as a link too. So many things on that website. Okay. Anyway, so what you get is you get this sort of framework or template to make an R Markdown document that has sort of some examples in it, right? It just kind of shows how you might use this thing. If I go ahead and save this somewhere, you can't knit a document without saving it, because the way it works is it saves it to disk, and then it actually calls on an external program called Pandoc to convert it into a document. So I'm going to go ahead and save this somewhere. Just going to save it inside a sort of disposable directory inside the class. I'm going to name it homework 1. Okay, if I knit this thing right now, right, I'm going to get this default template we saw in class. It's going to run the R code that's in the document, which includes the summary of the car's data over there on the left. You can see it runs summary on this car's data set. And it also does a plot over here, which is a plot of some more data built into R. And then the text is just what's written in the document. Okay. If you press the open browser window here, it'll pop it open in whatever your default system browser is. Most things look the same in this viewer as they do in the browser, but if you get to be kind of doing some complex stuff in them, sometimes the browser that's built into RStudio won't view everything perfectly, but usually it works fine. Okay, so normally what I would say to do now is basically to delete all of this junk, because we don't need any of it. Right? For this homework assignment, we're going to be working with a different data set. We can do whatever we want. And we're just going to sort of, well, honestly, we're just going to do whatever you tell me to do for examples, using that Swiss data set I talked about in the homework. Okay? So if I wanted to load the Swiss data set into my global environment, how would I go about doing that? Remember?
The data function? Is that
There's a function called data. If I say, basically if I say data Swiss down here and I run it, you would see the Swiss data set appear up here in the environment window. It shows up as a funky thing called a promise for now, basically saying, I promise you these data exist, but I'm not going to show them to you yet. I could, for instance, do something like Swiss like this. It will pop up here in the environment, and this is the entire Swiss data set displayed in my console down here, the data we're going to work with. It's a pretty tiny data set. There aren't that many cantons in Switzerland. So it's kind of practical for doing one of these assignments. You could actually display everything on a sheet if you wanted to. Okay. Now, the thing is if I attempt to use this Swiss data set in my R Markdown document, so let's say I create a chunk. So I hit Control-Alt-I because I'm on a Windows machine, and that will insert a chunk. On a Mac, it's Command-Option-I, maybe. I always forget which one it is on Macs. And that'll insert a chunk. I could then say something like, give me a summary of the Swiss data. Okay. If I run this here, it's going to run a summary of the Swiss data. What do you think is going to happen if I knit this document? What am I going to see in that document?
The output that you're seeing in the console?
In theory, I would, but we're actually going to see something else. If I knit this, oh, the Swiss data set is built into R. Never mind. A data sets built into R can be loaded without calling on them. If this was a data set not built into R, this would not work. You don't have to do a data Swiss call for this data set. So I've actually tricked myself here. Other data sets later, they will not be able to load like from your global environment. You would normally need to have to do something like data Swiss and call it up before you could use it, or if it was in a package loaded in a library. We're going to use data next week from a library called Gapminder. I wouldn't be able to say summary Gapminder here and get any output without loading it first using library like that, which I can actually sort of demonstrate, assuming I've got it installed. So if I do library Gapminder and then summary Gapminder, it gives me that data set. If I don't put library here, it's going to kick out an error at me saying it can't find it. This is just something that's important to know. Everything that occurs in an R Markdown document, it has to be fully like encapsulated in here. You can't in your R Markdown document refer to anything you haven't loaded or created in the document. So if you've created something in your console, like for instance, I'll make a new variable, I'm just going to call x. I'm going to say x is equal to the number 10. If I go over here and put x in my document up here and run it, you're going to see 10. But if I knit this document, it's going to say it can't find x. It's because I created x in my console, not inside the document. Does that make sense? Play with this sort of thing and it might make a little more sense. Basically, our Markdown documents must be reproducible. So when I say that I'm kind of showing you guys reproducible research throughout the entire class, you're forced to with these R Markdown documents. And one of the most common errors that people will make is they'll run some stuff in their console that creates stuff in their global environment, and they'll try and call on it in their document. They can run it like this in their active window here, but when they knit it, it gives them an error. It's probably because you created it in the console, it exists in your environment, but it doesn't exist in the document. It's okay if that's confusing. You'll see. Oh, so here's a question. Chuck, does the HTML on a different computer if the data file used is local? The HTML will be viewable to anyone else. It's a static document. So if I knit a document and give somebody the HTML document, they might not have the necessary data to run the RMD file, but the HTML will look the same to them. Sometimes if you make a document that doesn't have, that like calls on images and things, you might have to send the images to, unless you make it a self-contained HTML document, which is something you can see in the Markdown documentation linked off the course website, or you can ask me about it and I'll tell you how to do it. Okay, so just as sort of an example, I'm going to keep data Swiss here and load it. So what do we want to do with this? What do you folks want to see? What do you want to see in this document?
How about some ways of subselecting data and like renaming variables? Like I remember in the past having trouble like, I'm trying to remember. I remember being really frustrated trying to do certain kinds of subselections and certain kinds of operations to multiple columns, but I can't remember exactly which ones gave me trouble.
Okay, well, we can start with something relatively easy. So I haven't actually introduced subsetting in the class yet, but in labs, I'm always happy to jump ahead. So, you know, it's okay if I'm getting to something that's too advanced in lab, but I will always try and answer the questions asked. So basically, there's two different ways sort of in this class I'll cover for subsetting, two general ways. There's what's referred to as the base R way for subsetting things, which uses square brackets. And then there's tidyverse stuff I'm going to introduce on Wednesday. I'm going to show you a couple base R ones before I get to the tidyverse stuff on Wednesday. I'll answer that question in chat right after I show this. So let's say I'm going to just take a quick look at the Swiss data set. And I see the Swiss data set has columns like fertility, agriculture, examination, whatever. Let's say that what I'm interested in getting is a data frame that just has, say, the fertility and agriculture columns, right? Those are the first two columns of the data set. I can use square brackets as a subsetting operator over here, and I could say, give me all of the rows. If I leave it blank right here, either with or without a space, that says give me every row. And then I could say, give me columns 1 and 2. So I create a vector here. If I run this in my console, you'll see this is just the numbers 1 and 2. This subsetting operator with the square brackets, this is the rows position. This is the columns position. If I run that, I'm going to get all of the rows because I haven't selected anything in particular, and I've gotten the first 2 columns. So this is already kind of some weird codey looking crap that is already a little hard to understand when you look at. It's not the way we're going to be subsetting data most of the time in this class, but it requires a little lead up to show you how to do it. The way I would normally show you to do in class, which I might as well just show you, looks something like take the Swiss data set and then select fertility and agriculture, and that would grab those 2 columns, but you need to load some special libraries to do that, which I'm not going to introduce until Wednesday. So I'm going to tell you, it looks a little ugly right now, but it's going to continue to get easier and more coherent as time goes on. I just don't want to introduce that yet. So this grabs the first 2 columns. I could then do something with this, right? I could probably say plot, and it would give me a scatter plot of those 2 variables, fertility and agriculture, which I couldn't do if I did the entire data set, most likely. Yeah, if I do a default plot, it gives me a pairwise plot on that. So that would be subsetting. Was that closer to sort of the type of subsetting you want to do? Select a couple columns?
I can't exactly remember what gave me trouble, but it seems like a good place to start, and I think eventually I'll probably run into the stuff I was struggling with. So
okay.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly, we'll be spending much more time subsetting data starting, well, a lot starting on Wednesday. So we'll get there. This is unnecessary for the most part in this particular one. Don't need to do too much of that. I'd recommend for this probably sticking with doing like Swiss $ fertility or something, which is it says take the Swiss data set and then extract the fertility variable from it, which is a little easier than this bracket subsetting for now. Okay, so this question in chat that I keep delaying is, what does the results command do for chunks and how is it used? So the results argument you can put up here. So basically it's one of these commands that goes up in the chunk options. For instance, I've shown things like echo equals false. So if I take this and I go run this echo equals false, you'll see I have all the output from the chunk, but the chunk itself is hidden. Okay. If I change this back to echo equals true, it shows the chunk and still shows the output. What the results argument does is it messes with the output that's shown. So I could say results equals one of 4 things. There's markup, as is, hold, and hide. The only one you'll probably commonly use is hide. If I type this and run it, it's going to hide all the results. So results is the kind of thing you might want to use if you want to run some chunk and show the chunk, but you don't want to show what it outputs. There'll be times when you might want to do that. I don't use it too often, but it just hides the results. Okay? There's a million of these things, and normally the thing to do is to not try and memorize all the things you can do. Over time, you'll naturally start to remember them, but more like when you want to use something, do something in particular, ask me or look online and then, you know, figure it out. The thing about like coding anything is that the vast majority of like, the majority sort of the learning you'll do on coding is going to be searching for answers, and it's only when you've kind of searched for things multiple times and used it multiple times does it really tend to stick. So don't expect to be memorizing things all the time. You'll figure out over time sort of how to use these things regularly. And then the more time you spend doing it, the more and more stuff you just sort of is second nature, and then new stuff that's confusing approaches on the scene. So endless process. Okay, anything else that somebody wants to see?
I've got a question for you. I was trying to use the Pander package and I was having trouble with that. It was working fine, but I couldn't get the columns to all stay on one line in my init. I tried everything that I could think of that was a command on the Pander package, and still it would be 3 columns at the top, 2 columns on the next line. Is that just part of it, or am I doing it incorrectly?
So it depends. So we can mess with that. So I'm going to load up the Pander package here. So I'm going to have Pander here. And then let's just say I want to do Pander Swiss. This is what the Pander package actually outputs. It's just raw text that looks like this. This is raw markdown text. If I knit this document, it's actually not going to show anything because I have to take results equals hide off. Now it will show the table. And like the problem you're talking about, it's breaking it up into 2 kind of tables because there's too much stuff for it to put on one line. So what I can tell this here is I can say split dot, I think it's split dot tables. Split dot tables, is that what it is? Yeah. Split dot tables. This is the number of characters to allow the table to be in maximum width. Okay. So I set here 120 because that's wider than what we began with. The default is like 80. And now the entire table should be able to fit on 1. And you might be asking, where did I come up with 120? I guessed, and it worked. You might make it wider or narrower. Like 100 probably wouldn't be wide enough. Might be. Nope, that did the job. Just arbitrary. So yeah, that's just a command that says make the table wider.
Awesome.
Or up to a maximum width. Okay. Next one in chat. How do you turn row names into a column in the data frame? That's actually a really good one. There's a couple ways to do that. So one thing I could do is I could say, let's say Swiss, let's name it Canton. Why not? Let's call it the province and let's go to Canton. And then I'm going to say row names Swiss. So let me show you what row name Swiss is. It's a vector of all those row names that I'm pulling out of the Swiss data frame. So what I'm saying here is I'm saying in the Swiss data set, extract Canton. You're like, well, wait a minute. There isn't a Canton column here. This is the interesting dual purpose of like subsetting in R. If something does not exist, you can assign something to a location that doesn't exist to create something. So I'm essentially saying in the Swiss data frame, we're going to create something called Canton as a column. I'm going to assign to it the row names of the data set. I do that, look at the data set, and now there's a new Canton column over here that just contains those row names. So that's one way you can do it. There's a tidyverse way I'll show later in the term that's a little bit nicer, but it's basically the same thing. That answer your question? Okay. Next question. Do you have to run library Pander and tidyverse every time you're creating a markdown file? If you want to use Pander or the tidyverse, yes. So the idea is the R markdown files must be standalone, meaning that if you have packages loaded on your computer, like in your environment, R markdown, when you knit it, it can't see those things. So they must be loaded in the document. Anything that gets used in any way in the document must be loaded inside the document in some way. You could call out to another script that loads those packages or something for you, but they have to all be self-contained. You can't make an R markdown document that uses stuff in your global environment, which is a nice restriction. It makes you have good programming practices.
Does it have to go at the top of the file? You know what I mean? Or like, can it go anywhere as long as it's included in the file?
It can go anywhere so long as any commands in that package are used after it. It runs everything sequentially. So as long as I don't have a Pander call before this, it'll work. But if I go like library, if I put the Pander call up here, it's going to yell at me because it couldn't find the function Pander. But if I put it afterwards, it'll work. So it's all done sequentially, just like if you had just opened RStudio fresh with nothing loaded and ran through it line by line. Next one. When is the code case sensitive, and does it matter if we put a space after commas? So R is always case sensitive. R is a case sensitive language, which means writing true and writing, it actually corrected that for me. Writing true and writing true are not the same thing. In fact, they're even color coded differently. True here is R expecting an object named true, whereas true here is the actual Boolean, the true. That would mean something is either true or false. Everything in R is case sensitive. The next one there is, does it matter at all if I put a space after commas? No. Spaces in R generally do not matter as long as they're not in object names. If I put a space inside, for instance, true here, it's no longer true because the space makes it think that T and R is one thing and U and E is one thing. That's about the only way spaces matter in R.
How do we make the color-coded display happen in our R? Because it's not in my version.
Are you writing your code inside of a chunk like this, or are you writing it inside of the document like here? Because if I write true, you'll see it's not color-coded.
Oh.
It's because in the R Markdown document, all code basically needs to go inside chunks, so it only color codes the stuff in a chunk. So if I take this exact stuff, paste it outside, it doesn't color code it. This is sort of just a reminder that this code here won't be run. For example, if I knit this right now, you'll see it just shows true, library, pander, pander, Swiss, right? It doesn't load anything. It doesn't run it as R code if it's outside of the chunk.
Is there color-coded in blue for the all capture, but it's not, even when I put it inside a chunk, it's not color-coded into red.
What color is it for you?
What was that?
What color is it for you?
It's black.
Black. Oh, you have a different theme going on, or so. One thing is if you go into your appearance over here, I'm using RStudio's sky theme over here, and Twilight is my editor theme because it's one of the themes that's very dark, so it doesn't make me slowly and continually go blind staring at it constantly. So my color coding might be different from yours. It should be a different color though if it's in a chunk.
Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. If not, I can take a look at it. Next one. Why is taking the mean of every column valid, but mean Swiss not valid? So how are you taking the mean of every column? So if I go mean Swiss, it's going to say argument is not numerical or logical. It's returning an NA. It's trying to run a mean on the entire data frame. I see what you're doing. Okay, I'll copy that in, and we'll see what it's actually doing. So for me, that doesn't work. So what's going on here? Oh, so this is, you probably wanted that, like that, which is still not going to work. So what exactly is your goal to do? So the thing with the mean function in R is the mean function can only do work on a single numeric vector at once. So I can do this. I could also do that and get, oh, what am I missing here? There we go. I can do that and get two different means. If you want to run a mean on the entire data frame, you could do that with commands that are slightly more advanced, like for instance, sapply Swiss mean. And what that says is take the Swiss data set and get the mean of every column. It won't work for me because I've added a non-numeric column. So what it's going to do is it's going to give me the mean of all the columns and an NA for Canton because it can't take a mean of a categorical variable. So the way R works is instead of doing things like in loops or something, you tend to do these apply style commands. This says, using every element of this object, run this command once on every element. a single element of a data frame is a column. So this runs mean once for every column in the data set and produces it. This is advanced. This is week 6 or week 7 stuff. So don't blast it from your mind if it's confusing. And yeah, here's another it's a great follow-up to that. I could, instead of saying 1, I could say $fertility, $agriculture, and I'll get the exact same result. R lets you subset things in a lot of different ways. And so you just use whichever one makes sense to you at the moment. Sometimes numeric subsetting, like selecting the first column, makes sense. Other times doing it by names makes sense. Yeah, when we submit homeworks, we'll submit both the HTML and the RMD file. And let me go back up. I missed one question. How can we include code into a chunk? Are you saying how can we display the code in the document? If you mean how can we display it in the document, as long as echo equals true is on, it will be displayed in the document. So make sure all that stuff is fine. If that should work. It should show, you'll see library, pander. It then breaks up the output because this generates a table. And then if I go down to the bottom, then you'll see true breaks it up again for the output of true. I assign those row names. Here's Swiss data set with the Canton variable added. There's the mean of that, blah, blah. But it shows all the code in here. Was that what you meant?
That's maybe a stupid question, but I mean, like my code is not in the chunk. It doesn't work now. Like it is in the line 7, 8, or 9, but not, yeah.
Oh, yeah, if it's, so are you saying you had some code like in here, or?
Yeah, I don't know how to make it into the chunk and make it work.
Ah, well, yeah, there's 2 options. One, you could probably do, you can just hit Control-Alt. So I didn't highlighting, didn't do anything. I kind of hope you would wrap it in a chunk. If you hit Control-Alt-I, create a chunk and just paste it in there. Probably the easiest thing. The other thing you could do is you can manually type it, right? So if I had it looking like this, I could literally just say backtick, 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 squiggly R, backtick, 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 and that's all the chunk is. So you just manually create one.
Thank you very much. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. Great question. Okay, I'm going to delete that because I don't need it. I'm going to delete some of this other junk in here I don't need. Okay, so.
If you have text in a not a chunk, but you add like a little piece of R code where maybe you just like wanted to say the mean of this variable is whatever, is there a way to test that without having to knit the file, or is the only way to sort of see how that will turn out is to knit it?
Nah, don't have to. So I'll show you. Then I'll say, for example, the mean of fertility is R Swiss fertility. So I could knit it, but another thing I can do is if my cursor, or not my cursor, but my little caret that's blinking is in the middle of that, and I hit Control Enter, it will bring up a pop-up.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Next question I saw in chat, when we're making a table, what's the purpose of style equals R markdown? Oh, that's an excellent example. I'll show you. So if I knit this with that pander table right there, the pander table, oh, here, let me, just gonna delete all that. So my default pander table looks like this. If I say, style equals R markdown, here it looks basically the same. Yeah, with some of the other styles, they might look slightly different. The only real difference is if I run this here, you'll see it looks like this. If I take style away, you'll see there's no dividers anymore. All it does is control whether or not there's dividers in there, and depending on your document style, it may or may not even look different. It's just a way to get slightly different looking tables, and I forget what their options are. I think if I go pandoc.table, let's see, style. Maybe it's in the top level pander call. Pander.table. Nope, it's in pandoc.table somewhere. Let's see, style. Oh, there it is. Style, multi-line grid sample R markdown Jira. So I could, for instance, I have no idea what this is going to do. Ah, now it looks like that. Million different styles. Maybe they look different in your document. See, that one doesn't even come out right. So you don't really have to mess with it, but it's for sort of manually styling it. Pander is a pretty simple package in R, and if you're going to make tables for anything other than quick like memos and stuff, I don't recommend it as a table package. We'll later on in the class move on to more advanced table making packages that let you actually make good looking things. But Pander's nice because it just sort of displays any object in R as a table, which is useful. Okay, what next?
Do you have any resources that you recommend if we're thinking about like what kind of graph we might want to make, like where we could look and understand like what are the possible graphs we could make with base R?
Ah, yeah. So I do have resources that you could look at. I would almost recommend waiting until Wednesday to worry too much about like the many options of graphics, because we're going to get into visualization with ggplot, which will open a lot of windows on Wednesday. But there are good resources. And in fact, if I, let me see, let me break off a window over here. Let's see. There's stuff like the cookbook for R's graph reference, the R graph catalog. I don't know if the R graph catalog still works at UBC. It used to. No, okay, they don't have it anymore. Let's see. This is mostly base R graphics stuff, showing you different ways to plot. Most of this is ggplot, actually, from the look of it. This is all ggplot nowadays. There's basic graphs, showing you different histograms and densities, doing like, showing you QQ plots for models, box plots for categoricals. Trying to think if there's a really good base R one I've got lying around. Almost everybody primarily uses ggplot for serious R plotting these days, aside from like the diehard people. There are definitely people out there who will tell you ggplot is garbage. No one uses that, and they're probably all like 50 years old or older at least. But you know, there's a lot out there. This is an example of a link I really need to update. So where is it? The graph catalog. They've probably still got it around somewhere. For base R, no, I don't know. And my base R skills are just garbage nowadays. I do almost everything in ggplot aside from like a couple things that are annoying to do in ggplot. For ggplot, there's a million good things out there. Some of them are beautiful. Like for instance, the ggplot, where is it? Let me see. Yoink. Like ggplot cheat sheet showing you all the different ways you could visualize things and the commands associated with them. And so when we get into ggplot, this sort of stuff becomes more useful. You might be like, oh, well, what I want to do is I've got like some two-dimensional data that I want to do like sort of a density plot on, but you know, it's like, oh, maybe I'll do like a hex plot or something like that. You can track them down. This is useless to people if they don't have a little bit of experience with ggplot, but it does show sort of the possibilities that are out there. But there's so much good stuff out there that normally what I would say is like, you kind of like search for things. Well, I mean, it depends. If you got some weird thing you want to visualize and you don't think you've ever seen it visualized right before, shoot me an email. That's always a good option because I probably have seen something weird out there and know how to track it down. And if you don't know the weird name for things like, oh, what's a violin plot? You know, it's like you might be like, I'm not thinking. I'll be like, oh no, that's totally exactly what you need for that purpose. You know, take advantage of the knowledge of people around you and don't spend hours searching on Google.
Thank you.
Okay. What next? How do we open XLSX files on R? So I will get to that in week 5. I think it's 5. But the gist of it would be there's a package called read Excel. You would use it. It's actually, I think it comes with the tidyverse. In read Excel, there's a function called read Excel, and then you just give it the directory on your computer where the file is, and it will pop it in the way it would pop in anything else. Excel files, if it's coming from a responsible source, will open just fine in there. If it's coming from people who like to do formatting by merging cells and stuff, it will get more complicated. And if that is the case, let me know, because there are packages that can sort of disassemble an Excel file into its component merged pieces and pull data out of it, but they're more advanced than what I teach in my class. What next?
I have kind of a working in our studio question that's a little more general, but I had another instructor talk about or suggest like doing another file of, I don't know whether he just called it Sketchpad or whether it's officially called Sketchpad, but like another file next to your markdown file to kind of like test things out, kind of like your notepad, if you will, and then obviously having like the final clean version in another document. What are your thoughts on that? Or yeah.
Yeah, so it depends. And you could do something like that very easily by just having an R script over here where you're running stuff. And there's nothing like wrong. It's just a different style. The thing is, you can basically do that like I've been doing here inside of the R Markdown document in a chunk. So you can basically do the same thing, but it's like whatever works better for you. So I honestly work primarily in R script files like this. So I'm usually working in a script file, writing my code out in a script file. And my R Markdown documents are usually pretty sparse with code. I usually run, because most of the time, I mean, if I show like that's a good example of this. So if I've got like, if I've got a whole bunch of code that's doing a bunch of processing, like this is processing for, what's a good example of this? One sees. Yeah, I mean, if I've got huge just piles and piles of code like this in documents, I don't want to put this in an R Markdown document. Nobody wants to see this shit, right? It's you don't put like 150 lines of code, sitting inside your R Markdown document unless it's a demo for somebody else to see what you did. So most of the time I would have code like this sitting in a script file like this. But when I do an R Markdown document, I would call on that code or the results of that code. I'm trying to see if I have an R Markdown document for this lying around, but honestly, I don't even have any R Markdown documents that think of this entire project. I do have, load up tomorrow's job talk. In this document, this is a presentation I'm actually giving tomorrow. If you look in this R Markdown document, you'll see there's basically no R code anywhere in here. Because what I've actually done is I have run all my models, generated all my plots and stuff like that in other R scripts. And then when I knit this document together, it just calls out on those results and loads them into here. So that's one way to do it if you've got like big documents, big projects. Like if I have a dissertation, I'm not going to load all my dissertation code inside of a single R Markdown document. I would actually do it all in R script files and then load it externally. Yeah, but that's a little bit more advanced than like right now. We're in like the first week of the class. Yeah, but that's actually the Sketchpad method that's a perfectly good approach. Do whatever sort of works best for your work style. I typically kind of go back and forth, and it really depends on the purpose. Like if I'm doing something like making a presentation for this class, I'd only work in an R Markdown document probably. But if I'm doing something for like a project, 90% of the files in any project are going to be R script files anyway, so I just do it all there.
In general, do you have your R Markdown call those scripts and rerun them whenever you run R Markdown, or do you save the results from those scripts and then just call the results?
So it depends. Often I have models that take a really long time to run. If a model takes like a couple of hours or a day to run, I don't want to rerun it every time I knit the document, and then I'll call on its results. If it runs basically instantly, I'll call on it using the source function. So the function source in R, if you give it a, you know, some R script.R, what it will do is it will open up that R file, sequentially run every line of code in it, generating all those objects in the environment. So this is a way you could call out to some other file and run it. And I do that in some things. If you really want to be doing, if you've got like a big project that has a lot of things running in it, my recommendation would be to run Drake pipelines, which is a way to do, let me see if you can, basically is a way to automatically run and generate dependency graphs. So if I ran something like, yeah, I tell it I want to generate this report, it will go back and run in sequence all the files necessary to generate it. But then if you say change one of them, it will only rerun the things that have changed or will change as a result of that change. So if you're in big projects, the way to manage it is with a Drake pipeline like this, well beyond anything we'd cover in this class. But if I was working on some large project that needed to be really reproducible, I would do a something like that. They don't really have any fancy Drake examples in here, but yeah. So that's kind of the advanced way to do it. I usually just do it with source, or I run the script and save an object and load it later.
I have a quick question about the R project file type. Is that just to like ensure that you're in the same working directory the same time, like any one time you open up that file?
Yeah, kind of. So the R project file, it does a couple things. So the thing about the R project file is what it's really doing is allowing you to make that directory like transportable to other locations. Let me see if I've got a. So for instance, this is the sort of like the folder for this class, right? So on my computer, this is where the folder is. The R Markdown, or the R project folder here, the CSSS508, this file being there means that if I copy and paste this directory like into a portable drive, give it to somebody else, and they open, all they have to do is double click on this thing, and it will pop open RStudio in a new instance with that as its working directory. And if I was doing things like saving the R history and stuff like that, it would actually also load those things as well. So it kind of gives you a way to sort of resume where you're at. I actually highly recommend not having things set to resume in any way, shape, or form, and rather every time you open RStudio, it is completely wiped and fresh. But yeah, so these project folders are project files. They're really nice, not just for managing the directory, but for also sharing it so other people don't have to manage them. If you work mostly by yourself, like I do, you know, that functionality doesn't get used too often, but it is kind of nice. I do sometimes move between many different computers, and it's nice to have it all managed like that. What else we got? You can ask basically anything. I mean, it's like, how do I do this thing that's going to go straight into my homework? No bright ideas?
Sorry, I was on mute. I was I was wondering, when you say in the homework to mix some inline R calculations, by that, do you mean like you want us to maybe create some new variables based on the existing ones, or to just sort of use R as a calculator like you showed in class?
You can, so basically there'd be someone like this, right? So for an example, this is an inline statement, right? For the example, the mean of fertility is R mean Swiss fertility. I'd want you to round this number, so I'll show you. If I can't find the script file, it's getting angry at me. Okay, there we go. Let's knit this. So that's an inline statement there in that, you know, it says the mean of fertility is 70.14 to 5532, whatever. Something like that. I would just say round it maybe, but that's basically all I mean, you know. You could create this variable. So this is me saying round this thing to 2 decimal places. I'll knit it here and show now it's 70.14. You could also instead do this all up here, like just say X is that, and then you could display it there. You get the exact same result. So you could define a variable and then print it, but as long as you've got some kind of an inline statement like that, that's all I'm really looking for.
In that,
Okay.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm all set. Thank you.
Can I do a quick follow-up on this one?
Yeah.
I was interested in having some inline code to list out all the names of the variables and the cantons and maybe even the average values for some of the variables. Is there a way that you can sort of recursively do variable name mean, variable name mean, variable name mean, so that you don't have sort of 2 separate inline code options, but you have them a little more integrated for easy reading?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Does that question make any sense at all?
Oh no, it makes I know exactly what you're after.
Cool.
So it depends. Do you just want it printed out kind of like as a sentence or more tabular?
Let's see. It would be nice if I could do it as a sentence. I think I can do it tabular, but I'd like to learn a new trick.
Okay. Okay. And right before I get started on this, the question there, why does table continues below appear between all my tables when I knit my R Markdown document? Is it being broken up into multiple tables? If it's being broken up into multiple tables, add split.tables equals some larger number, it won't break it up. If it's still writing that text, but it's not splitting the tables up, increase the number just a little bit, and maybe it won't think it's breaking it into multiple tables.
Awesome.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, so we're going to do something funky then. Let's see if we can make this thing print into the console exactly what we want. So what we essentially want, right, is we want to get, for each variable, we want to extract its name and then the mean of that variable. So a quick way to get those things, right, would be take basically, so I'm actually going to, okay, let's get the Swiss data set and then get its means. So what this is right here that this sapply Swiss mean is going to produce, this thing right here is a named vector. So that means that the actual values of the numbers down here and these things up top are names. And so we're going to use some shenanigans here. So I'm going to say, I'm going to call this example vector here. And then what I'm going to do, let's see, how about, let's say, paste example vec and paste together. I'll tell you what I'm doing here in a second. I got to mess with it real quick. Example vec, this should paste them together into that. Okay. And then what we want to do is, let's say, separator is collapse equals. Let's get in there. Okay, and then I'll say let's not use that as a separator. Let's use that as a space. Mean of that. Now we're on the right track. Let's see what happens if I call that in an R-line statement. Yeah, we're getting there. So, the weird shit that I just did there.
I like it.
Yeah, the weird crap that I did, I basically said, okay, what we're going to do here, break it into multiple lines, make it clear what's going on. There's a lot of different arguments being given to this function. So the paste function here, if I say paste x and paste y, it pastes x and y together. If I say paste x, y, and z, it pastes x, y, and z together into a single thing. Okay? So what I've actually done, though, is I've said we're going to paste together the mean of and then names example vec, which is an entire vector of things. R does a thing called vector recycling. If you give a length, in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a length 6 vector to paste, it's going to automatically repeat the length 1 thing 6 times. So it's basically pasting the mean of fertility, the mean of agriculture, the mean of examination. And then I just pasted together the mean of variable names is the actual mean of those variables. And then I said, separate all of this text by spaces. And then when you get done with pasting together the first element of each of these, put a comma and a space at the end, and then jam them all together into a single piece of text, which is what collapse does. We're going to spend a bunch of time on this in week 8, actually. Like I said, I don't mind getting ahead of myself. Basically, it stuck it all together into a long sentence. You'd probably want to say something instead like, I'm going to change this to function of x, mean of x, round to, okay. There, now they're rounded. So advanced, but not completely unpractical. It will make very little sense to look at this probably, but in week 8, it will be very clear what's going on here. So when you look at that, next question here in chat, I tried to duplicate the code but have an error that says attempt to use 0 length variable name. What does that mean? And then your chunk looks like that. R, comma, echo equals true, pandas split tables that. Okay, so typically what this is so I suspect you have something on a, do you have like a space here? Does your chunk look like this, grayed on the background, and not like all black or anything like that? Okay, it looks like this. Because normally what that error would mean was there's some 0 length variable name like up in here, like I think I could trigger that error by like that, hitting Control Enter. Did you highlight this code and include highlighting the first line of the chunk?
Yes.
Don't do that. Highlight like this and it will work fine. So by highlighting the top up here, it's actually trying to run this chunk header line, but that is not a thing. That's not actually our code. This up here is actually basically it's our markdown code. You should be fine if you run everything inside the chunk like that. But if you try and run these like, well, actually that'll work too. If you try and run this line, it's going to yell attempt to use 0 length variable name because this isn't valid R code.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. Next, how do we create a table of the summary output where we have row names instead of min that? So let me take a quick look at that. So we have something like this. So what you want is to just have a name over here and then the numbers all across, correct? Okay. Okay. Let's see what we can do. Let's see what happens if I say, there we go. Okay, so this is me abusing more apply shenanigans in R that I won't teach you until week 6 or 7. But basically this says, instead of running summary on the entire data set, go and run summary once each on each of the columns and then bind them together. The thing is because they all have the same row name when bound together, it combines them all by default. So this is sort of just a clever trick. Over time, you learn these little like nuances of it, especially with base R. But that's one thing you can do.
So this is in the Swiss data set is a totally nonsensible thing to do, but I'm going to ask how to do it anyway because it represents a larger misunderstanding of mine.
Okay.
What is the simplest way to get it to give me a mean of a row?
Oh, a row mean?
Yeah.
Oh, super easy. So there's the row means of all of them. So if you want the row mean of the entire data frame, you could do that. If you want the row mean of a single row, you could pick which row you want. So for instance, I could say, give me the Swiss data set, or actually the easiest thing isn't even to use row means, right? So that gives you the row means of the entire data set. I could instead say mean Swiss, give me row 1 every column. Oh, let me see what that's returning really quick. Different data types. Okay. So yeah, the easiest thing to do would probably be to say, I want the row mean of the first row, second row, like the third row. Calculate the row means for all of them and then grab the one you want is probably the easiest way to do it.
So it's fundamentally you just need a different command. You can't do it with mean.
You can, but it's a little funky. So so to give an example, so if I say select the first row here, the kind of one of the issues here is you'll see this is a double, double, integer, integer, double, double, and it's probably getting a little grumpy over the fact that I'm essentially trying to coerce some doubles into integers. But if I say okay, that's not going to work. What would be the easiest way for me to coerce this into a, I'm actually kind of confused why it's not coercing it to a, oh, 1 second. Your data frame. This is a rarely used command for me, so I'm going to look up what the tricky way to do this is. So is that drop dimensions? You can't use drop for a data. That's what I need to do. So I need to take dot matrix Swiss, and then I need to take mean. That'll work. Okay. So the issue is that data frames are weird. So in a data frame, well, a data frame like, here, I'll show you. So the Swiss data frame here looks like a matrix of data if we are thinking about it in like mathematical terms. It looks like it has a bunch of rows, it has a bunch of columns, and it's filled with numbers. Okay. This is our line to you to show you something that is easy to interpret visually, but to R, a data frame is not a matrix. A data frame is an object called a list, and every column is a different element of the list, and rows don't actually exist. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying we need to turn this data frame into an actual rectangular numeric object, and then grab its first row and then take its mean. And then I can get the row mean that way. This is sort of a weird thing where if you're used to working with data frames, you might not realize that data frames are actually not like a matrix. Pulling a row out of them keeps them as a data frame by default. So like I said, the easier way is to use row means, which in the background is converted into a matrix first and then doing it. So essentially doing the stuff that row means is doing in the background. Confusing, right? Data frames are a one-dimensional object, but if you, so for instance, if I say, what is the length of Swiss? It's 6, because it has 6 columns in it. But if I say dimensions, it gives me 47 rows and 6 columns. Because while it is technically a one-dimensional object, it lies and pretends to be 2 dimensions when you need it. You just can't do some of these base operations like that on it as if it was 2-dimensional, but you can subset it as if it's 2-dimensional. Yeah, data frames are weird. But the reason is because a matrix in R can only store one data type regardless of the row or column. But in data frames, you want to have multiple data types in different columns. And so the way they do it is they make it a list. Yeah. So this question that I was here, let's see. I get this output when I try to put the supply function, the pander function. Is there a way to fix this? Yes, probably. So the thing is if I do this, oh, I bet you could just say, change it into a data frame. Yeah, that'll work. Change it into a data frame and then put it in pander. Pander much prefers to work with data frames over matrices, and so that should work. I like these little technical shenanigans. This is a more fun than usual first lab.
So you're answering all these questions, and I'm worried that I'm going to forget the answers to some of them when I actually need them. Is there any way that you can make this total mess of a markdown file that you're writing with all these like random questions answered available to us so that we can like, you know, bring it up with the recorded lab and like copy things out of it directly?
I usually resist doing it only because there ends up being so much bizarre garbage code that doesn't run, like it's not knittable. But I don't mind emailing it out. I'll email it to the class list. I don't want to put it on the website because I can't put it up as an HTML file to look at because half the code probably won't run.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Absolutely. I also won't email out later ones because the later ones turn into homework keys. Got to make people work for it at least a little bit. What else we got? In a pander table, how do you rename infant mortality to infant space mortality for aesthetic purposes? And there's no purposes higher than aesthetic purposes. Let us fix this. Okay, so as an example, I'm just going to go and create a new one since if I'm going to send this out, let's just put everything in. Okay, so our issue essentially is that we have this infant dot mortality here, and I would like to fix that. So what I could do, what's the easiest way to do that? Let's say, I don't think the tidyverse way of doing it is trivial, but I want to show a base R way to do it because we haven't gotten there. So why don't I say, a couple different ways. I'll show the first way that, yeah, I guess I could say names Swiss 6 is, you gonna get angry at me for doing that? Now, see how there's now a space in it? Okay, so this should theoretically work fine. If I scroll down, we'll see that there's infant mortality with a space. A logical question from this is that how do I then extract or call on this variable if it has a space in it? The answer is backticks. I can now use spaces in an object name in R if I wrap them in backticks. The backticks say everything in here, even if it has restricted unusable characters, is still an object name. I could even, for instance, have numbers at the beginning of an object name using backticks like this. I'll actually bring this up, I think, in week 3. So yeah, you could just change the name of it and put a space in there and it will work in Pander. You might want to create a temporary object so you don't modify the entire Swiss data frame for the rest of your document. You might create like a temp Swiss is Swiss and then modify temp Swiss and then display it with infant mortality. So yeah, you can do that. Anything else?
you scroll up for a second? I had a question and I lost it when we got onto that. Now it's gone. It'll come back, which is good.
No other pressing questions so far? How do you round the values in a pander table to 2 decimal points? The trick is to round the thing that's getting put into the pander table to 2 decimal places. It depends what you're putting in the table. So like, let's say what we want to do is we want to round the entire Swiss data set to 2 decimal places. I could take something like, I've got the Swiss data set. Well, it already displays as 2 decimal places here by default, but in the pander table, it should also automatically round to 2 decimal places. So it kind of depends. You have an example of what you want to put into the pander table? Do you have like a bunch of means or something? Oh yeah, they're all 2 decimal places already. Can I change the overall font type of the document that appears in the HTML? Yes. So the easiest way is to use a theme with a different font, but if you want to be specific about what fonts you want to use, you would have to look at the R Markdown documentation. You can definitely manually change things, but sometimes it involves messing around with style sheets slightly. It's not a Markdown thing, it's a HTML thing to do that. And so you could do like an external cascading style sheet. Like for instance, I think you can literally just do like style and give it a cascading style sheet. But normally what you do instead is you probably theme it. So to see about getting that rounded to 2 decimal places again. So let's say if we imagine this had more than 2 decimal places, I mean, how about I round to 0 to prove that it works? What I would probably do is just say, let's call it temporary Swiss. I'm going to say, well, honestly, the easiest way to do it would be to say, and then convert it back to a data frame. Now it's all rounded to 0 decimal places. So this is a abuse of, again, these apply commands I keep showing because they're always the easiest way to do everything in R. This says apply something to a list. The list I want to apply it to is the Swiss data frame. What I want to apply to it is round. I could actually do this with sapply, and it would probably give me the exact same output. Yeah. Once again, week 7 type stuff. That would round the entire thing, and then I just stick it in pander.
Are they all doubles because of something you did earlier that stuck, or is that rounding function making them all doubles?
So what was that again? A little quiet.
Are you, every column is now a double. Is that because of something you did earlier, or is the rounding function making everything a double?
It's actually because it converted this into, so the output of sapply is a matrix, and in a matrix, every element must be the same data type. And so what it did is it converted everything to double because that would lose the least amount of information. And then by converting it back to a data frame, it kept the data type of the matrix, which is double. So good observation. It's a sneaky one. Generally, you don't have to store anything as integers unless you really want to. Integers save a lot of room on disk if you have a really big vector, but basically double will do the job for just about everything, unless you want to do like direct numeric comparisons of exact values, then you probably want it to be integers. So question here. I've been trying to visualize the Catholic variable to describe kurtosis, but have been having trouble. Do you recommend a particular way to graph it to show kurtosis? I haven't messed with my my 4th moments in a long time. The function to pull kurtosis, how do you pull kurtosis in R? Function to pull kurtosis. I haven't pulled kurtosis from base R in a long time. Let me let's see. Kurtosis. Here, basics, statistics. No, I don't want that. I got kurtosis out. Yeah, okay, there is no base kurtosis one, so you can use the one in E1071. So I could say, so first of all, I just want to get the kurtosis. I can say E1071 kurtosis, Swiss. I'll explain what I'm doing. You're saying Catholic. Catholic. I could calculate the kurtosis there, and then if I want to visualize it, easiest way to visualize it, I suppose, would be to show the density, I suppose. All right, so I could say plot density Swiss Catholic and show it. It's kind of, kurtosis is sort of a weird statistic and something that's bimodal like this, but you know, you could visually look at it and get an idea, but I mean, it's so non-normal to begin with that I'm not sure how meaningful that is. Yeah. That answer your question? Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, if it was a little less camel-like, it might be more informative, but I'm not entirely sure how to connect. Yeah, I don't know, not sure how useful.
I guess what I was doing was I was trying to, it was like creating like a narrative in my homework assignment where it was like, you look at the summary and then you see that the median and mean are not.
Oh yeah.
That's kind of what I did to test to see if it was about skew or if it was bimodal.
Okay, yeah. Oh, that's fun. I mean, it's more advanced than probably most people are doing, but that's fun. So yeah, have that. Here, when I'm Googling for fixes to problems, I run into the issue that one of the most important terms is single letter as well as the name of the language. Do you have any tricks around this? I've tried putting in R in quotes, but I'm not sure. So there's a couple of things you can do. For me, I don't know if it's because Google tailors its search terms, but usually R and then what I want to do actually usually works for me. But you could also search for CRAN, C-R-A-N, which is the Central R Archive Network, and then CRAN that, or R statistics, and then, or R language, and then, or even R lang, one word. Those things can tend to help. But yeah, it's kind of an annoying thing with R. They haven't even blessed just with having like be like R plus or something to make it easier to search. Yeah. I don't do anything fancy. I literally just Google R and the thing I'm looking for, and I usually get a Stack Overflow thing to begin with. But that might be because my search history is tracked, and I basically search mainly for R stuff. What else we got? Got plenty of time. Answer anything.
If there's a little time for an off-topic question, I have one from my my partner who's a data scientist. It's rather advanced, and I may not understand the entire explanation. You can tell me if this is too much or not. She's written a package that she's hosting on GitHub. She's saying a couple of the functions call in the package SLSX for writing data frames. Other people using the package might not necessarily need the two functions that use XLSX, though they might only want some other functions that I've made. However, if they haven't installed RJava downloaded it or added a job to their path, then R generates a message there is a non-zero exit status when they install the package. Is there some way to avoid this?
Oh, yeah.
And you can say this is too far for today if it just seems like things have slowed down.
Yeah. Yeah. So that I mean that makes sense. I mean, you essentially have a case where you've got something that's, you don't want them to have to need, but it's essentially a package dependency where it's sort of like expecting them to have something. That's a better one for me to mull. Shoot me an email.
Okay, I'll forward it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Might not be able to solve it. I mean, yeah, I don't know. It would depend. I have to think about how R does the package build process when you install something from GitHub. But there's probably some way to set it up so it's not a so it can get past that. But there's not always a guarantee because yeah, it depends. Yeah, not a problem I've encountered when I'm building packages, but I basically just build little analysis things for myself, and so it's pretty simple. Yeah. Anyway, anything else? No little things you want to put in your homework, not quite sure how to do. Very simple questions are perfectly fine too. Something not working. Not sure where to find a document. You name it. Yeah. Can you explain the knitter opts chunk function? This is a funny one. So I've deleted it here, but if I create a new R markdown and get it back, it's right up here. So what this is, knitter options chunk sets a default value for the different header options like echo equals false and echo equals true. If you change this echo equals true to echo equals false, you no longer need to write like echo equals false down here in these other ones. If I, so I'll just gonna grab this and put it over here. I wonder if all these things will run. Let's see what happens. Okay. You'll notice none of my chunks show. It shows the output, but the chunks are all gone. So all I've done is I've changed it so by default, the chunks have echo equals false set. So if you don't want to have to keep typing echo equals false in every single chunk, you can just put it in the options for every chunk up here. And you can do that for any option that goes in a chunk one. So you could do something like, this is going to be kind of funny, but if I do results equals hide up here, I will get no chunks and no output except for images, because images are not hidden with results equals hide. All other results are now gone, and the only stuff shown is my text here and the plot. Just a way to set global settings for that particular markdown document.
And it's the same concept applies where it'll be only anything run below that function will come out that way.
I actually don't know. Let's find out. That one I think is a global document-wide one that is supposed to be up at the top, but let's see what happens. Yeah, see all the other code is now showing. This particular chunk with options chunk needs to be the first chunk in the document. It may even have to say setup, but I'm not positive. Let me see. No, okay, it doesn't have to say setup, but it does need to be the first chunk, apparently. Or in the first chunk. So like I could move this to here, I think, and that would be fine. Nope, it does indeed need to be in its own chunk for whatever reason. I rarely set my settings that way, so it's slightly mysterious. Anything else? Probably delete that one from there. No, don't. I don't know if people are typing and trying to figure out things to ask, or just everyone is sitting here together in silence, enjoying a wonderful moment. Nice silence for you, probably, and I have the sound of children coming in through my window. Ah, great question, yeah. Sorry I missed this earlier, but what is sapply supposed to be used for? sapply is a funny function that I won't introduce seriously until week 6 or 7. sapply basically is a function for repetitively running a function on something. So if I go up to, let's pull this out of here. So sapply Swiss summary says, take the Swiss data set, which looks like this, and then on each element of the Swiss data set, run the summary function, okay? So if I say summary Swiss fertility, I get something that looks like this, which is its minimum, first quartile, median, mean, third quartile, and maximum. Well, if you could imagine I run and this summary on every single column, I would get something that looks like this. It's minimum, first quartile, median, mean, third quartile, max, but I have one for each column. So what sapply is actually doing is it's just running the summary command iteratively, like one by one on every column in the data set. It's a slightly more advanced function that I'll show in week 7. So here's a question. Hi, Chuck. Hello. I used ggplot and added in a linear regression line using geom-smooth, but a message pops up when I hit the chunk. Found message equals false to stop from showing. Could you explain it? Yes. Hope I'm not stopping. No. So this is something that I will show in on Wednesday's lecture. I think it may actually even come up. So basically, if I have, okay, let's go. Let's say Catholic fertility plus. So if I've got something like this, what you are seeing in your document is it where it says geom-smooth using method equals low-s and formula y tilde x. So what this is telling you is because you did not tell geom-smooth what model you want to run, it's defaulting to running a low-s smoother, which is a type of local polynomial regression, and it's using a formula of y on x, y being fertility and x being Catholic, okay? If you don't want it to show, you have 2 options. One is message equals false like that, but the other one is you could specify what you want. You could say method equals, let's run a linear regression, and let's say formula equals y tilde x. And now it doesn't give me a message because I've specified that directly and it doesn't have any default value anymore. So you can either specify it or just hide it with message false if you want that low S curve. That make sense? Yeah. Good beans. We'll get all into this ggplot stuff here starting on Wednesday, so it's perfectly fine to look at this and be like, I have no idea what's going on there. In fact, most of this, it's okay to have no idea what's going on there. Be good to know what's going on with this and the pander call, maybe this. What else we got? Just realizing my phone is missing in action. One of the disadvantages of Zoom is in my in-person labs, I can either sort of dink around on something while I'm idly waiting or meander around the room and see what people are working on. And then these Zoom ones, it's just sort of mysterious. What is everyone up to?
I'm actually cooking vegetables for tacos because I can't focus anymore, but I'm watching a screen and this is super helpful.
Perfect.
Just to be honest.
Hey, no, that's great. That's actually the great thing about remote learning. So there's a question in chat. What's the difference between writing code in the editor and the console? Writing difference between it and the console is basically you can run the code in either place. Stuff you write in the editor up here is stuff you sort of keep, right? If I write code up in here, it doesn't disappear as soon as I've written it. And anything that I want to have in an R Markdown document needs to be written in the R Markdown document if I want it to be knitted into it. Anything I write down here in the console, no matter what it is, will not be included in my R Markdown document. The R Markdown doc can't access anything that I've done in my console or put into my environment. So basically, if you want it in your document, it's got to go up here in the editor window somewhere. Yeah, but the code will be exactly the same between the two of them. I would just recommend if you actually value the result of anything, it should always be in a script file or an R Markdown. You don't want to be in a position where anything important in any way exists only in your global environment or from commands in your console.
Is there a keyboard shortcut that you're using to make that the arrow directly rather than less than dash, which is what I use?
There is a shortcut, but I don't know what it is. I type it manually, but if you go to help keyboard shortcuts, wait, what? Keyboard shortcuts? Oh, no, there's got to be a quick keyboard shortcut. Where is it? Does it really pop open a new window now? It used to pop open one in RStudio back in the day. Things change. Let's see, insert. All right, insert assignment operator somewhere.
So is yours just being auto-replaced by the arrow after you type it? Because mine doesn't even do that. Mine
Oh,
just stays
yeah.
as 2 characters.
Yeah, that's what it is. So, there is a shortcut. It's Alt minus. So if you hit Alt minus, no, that doesn't equals. You're lying to me, help file. Yeah, but no, this is a thing called ligatures. So for many different things like equals equals, like not equals, you see how they convert?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a thing I've enabled on my mine called ligatures. I just like ligatures because they look nice. So normally I'd be teaching this through a lab computer on campus. I wouldn't have ligatures to confuse people like this, but I'm just used to them. If you want to enable ligatures, all you have to do is be using a font that supports ligatures. Like I use Fira Code Retina, which is just a nice looking code font. It has ligatures, and so it automatically uses them. But if I swapped over to something else like Consoles here, I have to reload my editor, my ligatures all go away. Ah, tragic. Let's fix that. Fira. Oh, back to safety. Okay. Yeah. Nah, just make it look pretty. Mhm.
What was the name of that font again? I'm finding I don't even have it, so I'm gonna have to grab it.
Ah, so the font or the name of the thing that combines stuff?
I got Ligatures, but just I don't know which fonts support it. None of the ones that I have downloaded seem to at a quick glance, so I was just going to grab the one that you use, Fire.
Oh yeah, I'm using Fira Code, and if you download it, it comes with a few different versions. They all look almost exactly the same. The Retina one is a slightly higher fidelity one, yeah, Fira Code is the font, and it's just I like Fira Code. I think it's this really readable one, so I like it for teaching. But there's a bunch of other ligature fonts out there. So if you search for if you really just search for fixed width ligature font, you'll find probably a lot of good ones. I'm trying to remember. There's one people really like. I think it's Nodo. Is it Nodo? Is the one that people all the Nodo sans has become popular. I think for coding. Yeah, I forget. There's always some coding font that's in vogue, and Fira Code was what everybody was using 3 years ago, and now people have moved on. It doesn't matter, but they mostly sort of modern coding fonts almost all support ligatures nowadays. Just none of the ones that come with RStudio for whatever reason. Ooh. 10 more minutes.
I have a question that's not exactly related to coding, but just R in general. So I've heard of GitHub, and I kind of understand what it is, but then I get confused by what is GitHub?
Well, that's an excellent question. So, for instance, GitHub is sort of a mix of different things. So, for instance, this is my GitHub profile on here. GitHub is basically a place to store projects of any kind that you're working on, usually coding-oriented projects, but not necessarily. It's just sort of a place that's a public repository of things. But what it is it's integrated and is based on a version control software called Git. Now, Git is the version control software that sort of underlies version control in the Linux operating system. It's actually made by the author of the Linux operating system, Linus Torvalds. It's a version control system. Version control systems are things that allow one or more people to work on a project, making arbitrary changes to code and stuff in it, sometimes simultaneously, reconciling those changes, and then keeping a record of every change that was ever made to any document in the project. So if I go, for instance, to this class, which is the CSSS508 repository, you can see it says here that I have made 603 commits to this project. That means I have made 603 edits to this class, and you can go back and see every edit I've ever made to this class, going back to when I created it, way back when. So you might be like this, okay, what is this? Let's see over here. What did I change in this time? Oh, this was when I moved my class from my class was in SIG, assigned to SIG 117. It got moved to SIG, or sorry, from 134 to SIG 117. You can see back then on whatever day this was, September 24th, 2019, I edited the header text in a bunch of my lectures. It records everything you have ever done. So if you want to talk about like reproducibility in your research, if your research projects are hosted on GitHub, anyone can go and see every change that's ever been made to anything in the entire project. So it's a really good way to log stuff. And that's sort of, yeah, you can see everything that's ever been done in my class from when the documents originally uploaded. And that's version control. GitHub is a place to host these version control projects.
Do you pay for GitHub?
No, it's free for the most part. If you're a student, you even get the professional features for free, but it's actually a free place to host stuff. So they got bought by, Microsoft bought GitHub not that long ago, and they've just maintained it ad-free, free to anyone to use, and with unlimited storage space. So I have, you know, probably a tremendous amount of stuff up on GitHub, gigabytes of stuff on it. Yeah, just free. It's sort of just a service to the world sort of thing.
Doesn't sound like the Microsoft I know.
So this is the funny thing, is that it doesn't sound like the Microsoft of like 15 or 20 years ago, but nowadays they've kind of moved pretty heavily directly in investing in open source software and things like that, and they just dump cash into it because the things they make their money on are no longer end users like you and me. Like they can give two shits about selling a copy of Windows to somebody anymore. All the money that Microsoft makes, kind of like Amazon, is actually on web backend stuff like Azure servers and things. They just don't care. They sell services to major corporations and stuff. Something like this doesn't cost them anything, and it's more, they make more money by sort of the publicity of running a free service like this, because storage space costs nothing, the bandwidth isn't that expensive, because it's hosting on their own servers and everything, right? Microsoft does a lot of that. There's a lot of incentives for tech companies to do things that are, you know, to provide free stuff because there's secondary benefits to it. I mean, by putting everything on GitHub like this, it gets them a lot of goodwill in the open source community. Though a lot of people, I will say, a lot of people did, as soon as Microsoft bought GitHub, they jumped ship to move to GitLab and other things like that. But I mean, honestly, out of all the tech companies out there, Microsoft isn't nearly the most evil of the major tech companies anymore. I mean, you know, they're not like sponsoring military intervention in foreign countries the way some are. So, you know, you could do worse. They do sell their services to like, you know, police agencies and things like that, and some authoritarian governments. So, you know.
Yeah, that's true. I don't remember the last time I've had the thought that a Microsoft CEO should be tried at The Hague.
Right. Yeah, it's like, you know, it's to some degree, it's sort of a, you know, I think about in terms of like capitalism and everything, you know, there's sometimes you hate the player and sometimes you hate the game. And these days, Microsoft is a little bit like, I hate them for the same reasons I'd hate every other large company. Yeah. Whereas some companies, you know, like Facebook or something like that, I'm just like, oh no, I can just hate them. I hate the player. So a question in chat, can R be utilized in qualitative research? It depends what you mean. There's a lot of things that you might use R for that sort of cross boundaries. A lot of people I know use them for sorting and working with corpuses that they might, you know, do qualitative work on, but they still want to do other things like discourse analysis, textual analysis. Data collection, big time. So I have a lot of people I know who do a lot of collection of text data, and they automate it through R, things like pulling stuff down off of social media, Twitter, Facebook pages, back when you could access Instagram, things like that. But they also do things like automate pulling down news articles, media stuff, books, stuff like that. It's a programming language. If a computer can do it, you can write R code to do it. So it's actually pretty good. A lot of people use it for text stuff. I tend not to think of most like discourse analysis and text analysis as really being qualitative research. I think of it as being sort of a different type of quantitative research because it's still sort of statistical and numerical under the hood. And when I think of qualitative research, I would think of sort of more interpretive work. R related to social network analysis. Oh, there's all sorts of great social network analysis tools for R. You know, you can use R to, I used to teach one of my last week's a class used to be scraping Twitter data and doing analysis stuff with it, but it was so hard for me to keep up with the state of the art in it because I don't do my own research in that area that I had to drop the lecture. But yeah, I mean, you can, it's so easy. It's trivial to pull down Twitter data. Oh God, you could scrape 10,000 tweets in one line of code in R. It's wildly, ridiculously easy to like scrape social media data and then use it to like construct social networks and things like that. Yeah, very powerful for it. If you want to do that, my recommendation would be the book Tidy Text Mining with R by these two outstanding authors. She's fantastic to follow on like Twitter and stuff and to look at her examples online. David Robinson also. This is a free textbook on text mining with R using tidy approaches like what I teach in this class. As I've said probably, I've already said at least once or twice, and I will continue to say, all the best R textbooks to learn stuff are usually free and online. This is a good example of one. So this includes some network analysis stuff in it.
Are we going to learn data scraping at all? I feel like that is going to be super important for me.
So I don't cover it in this class, but it depends what you mean by scraping. So if you mean like pulling unstructured data directly out of web pages, I don't teach that in this particular class, but there's a few good R packages for doing it, like RVest is sort of the tidy way to do it. Easy web scraping with R. That's an outdated one. Yeah, there we go. RVest is would show you sort of like demos of how to pull stuff down. So for example, here, look at this demo. This is the text might be a little small. So this here is loading the RVest library and then reading a IMDb web page for the Lego movie and then pulling it down, working the text a little bit and extracting, for instance, the cast of the movie. Over here, downloading the poster for it as an image. This kind of scraping is quite trivial to do using RVest. So if you mean actual scraping, like pulling off of web pages, RVest is your way to go, but it's sort of like a special topic I don't cover in here. But there are some classes on campus that do teach you web scraping, and I got a lot of friends that do a lot of scraping, so I could always like connect you there.
Do you know who teaches any of those classes or what they're called?
Yeah. Oh, geez. Who's doing the text analysis? So the text analysis class. Who's teaching that one? I don't even know what department that is in right now. Shit. Is that Google stuff? Who's teaching that? Text is data. E-science. No. Natural language processing. Yeah, I forget who's teaching the text analysis class. Let me go. There's probably a partner in here. Oh no, okay. Yeah, I forgot who teaches the the couple text analysis classes, and I forgot which department they're in. I felt like it was run out of like it was poli-sci. I would have to ask somebody else. If you email me, I'll email you. I'll hunt it down and email you back. I have to poke around. Usually there's some, I don't think it's through CSSS. I think it's through either, God, I'm trying to remember who teaches it. But yeah, no, there's a couple. There's and there's different levels of advanced. I mean, there's like the ones out of CSE, but there's also kind of the more applied kind of at like social sciencey level 1, and that's the one that my roommate, I'd have to go ask my roommate. My roommate took it a long while back. Actually, I think my girlfriend took it. I could ask her about. Remember, I helped her with scraping some New York Times stuff like years ago, so she's probably knows it. I have to check with them. So email me, and I'll send you back. Question here: could you give a few examples using R in management analysis? I know it's a big question. Yeah, no, it depends. So I actually. Well, it depends. I'm not super familiar with what exactly you might mean by management analysis, but I teach, for instance, at the University of Washington, Tacoma's Master in Science for Business Analytics. And a lot of people who my students are teaching there are essentially doing management analysis work. So they seem to be finding me useful because they keep hiring me back to go work there. But as far as like examples, it's kind of hard to know. That's more something I would poke around and look at. It's so far out of my area that I wouldn't be able to give you an authoritative answer without like poking around. But R is pretty extensively used in industry. Any place anybody's doing any kind of data science stuff, there's people doing it in R. Python is often more used in some areas of industry, but not always. R is incredibly well suited though to, I don't know, I mean, yeah, no, I mean, there's got to be people doing that stuff, and probably a lot of them doing it in R, but I'd have to have more information about what that entails. But you could probably just Google it and find good examples of it better than I could come up off the top of my head. Okay, we're about 5:22. So any last questions? There we go.
Thank you. This was super helpful.
Yeah, no problem. That's what I'm here for. I see all y'all on Wednesday, and then labs. The first 3 labs, like I said, are kind of like this, and then from there on, we'll kind of work through the homeworks together as a group. But it's mostly free form, kind of work on basics and stuff until then. And as always, Slack channel me or email me if you got any questions. You get stuck on stuff. Yeah, generally available. Cool. See you folks later.